When a $2 million presentation dies on a freezing highway, the last person you'd trust is a stranger with grease under his nails. But Claire Morgan had 28 minutes, a dead BMW, and zero options. The man who stopped didn't want her money. He wanted a sandwich. What she didn't know, he used to design the engines she was about to pitch. What he didn't know, saving her morning would cost him everything he'd hidden from. Some coincidences aren't accidents. Some strangers aren't really strangers. And sometimes the fastest way forward is letting someone else under the hood. If you want to see where this road leads, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The first thing Claire Morgan noticed that morning wasn't the cold, it was the silence. She'd been flying down I-90 just west of Chicago, the skyline a glittering promise in her rearview mirror, her presentation deck loaded and perfect on the passenger seat. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 sharp. She had 28 minutes. The highway was clear, the coffee was hot, and everything in her carefully constructed world was exactly where it needed to be. Then the engine coughed. Just once. A strange, wet sound that didn't belong in a $50,000 vehicle with a maintenance record cleaner than most medical files. Claire's hands tightened on the wheel. She'd heard that sound before, years ago, in her father's old Buick, right before it left them stranded outside Toledo in the rain. "No," she said aloud. "Not today." The BMW coughed again. This time it shuddered, the kind of full-body tremor that meant something vital had just quit. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree, yellow lights, red lights, symbols she'd never seen before, and didn't have time to decipher. The engine stuttered, caught, stuttered again, and died. Claire felt the power steering go first, the wheel suddenly heavy in her hands as she wrestled the car toward the shoulder. No acceleration, no response from the pedal. Just momentum and gravity and the sick certainty that everything she'd prepared for was about to slip through her fingers because of a machine that had chosen the worst possible moment to betray her. She coasted to a stop on the gravel shoulder, gripping the wheel so hard her knuckles went white. For 5 full seconds, she just sat there, staring at the dashboard like she could will it back to life through sheer force of personality. It didn't work. No, 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 no. She turned the key. Nothing. Turned it again. The engine didn't even try. Just a clicking sound, pathetic and final. Claire checked her phone. 26 minutes. The Harborline Motors headquarters was still 17 miles away, tucked into the gleaming tech corridor in Schaumburg. Even if she called a rideshare right now, even if one materialized instantly, she'd be cutting it too close. The board didn't wait. They especially didn't wait for junior executives who'd been given exactly 1 shot to prove they deserved a seat at the table. She'd spent 3 months on this presentation. 3 months of 18-hour days, of data modeling and supplier negotiations, and late nights that bled into early mornings. She'd built a pitch for a partnership that would position Harborline as a serious player in the electric vehicle market, a deal that could shift the entire trajectory of the company and her career with it. And now she was going to miss it because her car had died on the side of a highway. Claire pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and let herself have exactly 10 seconds of pure, undiluted panic. Her heart hammered, her throat tightened. The kind of fear that came from knowing you'd done everything right, and it still wasn't going to be enough. Then the 10 seconds were up, and she lifted her head. She was Claire Morgan. She'd clawed her way from a state school scholarship to a corner office at 29. She didn't fall apart when things went wrong. She found solutions. She grabbed her phone and pulled up the roadside assistance app. Estimated wait time, 45 to 60 minutes. Useless. She tried calling her assistant, but it went straight to voicemail. Stephanie didn't start until 8:30, and it was barely 7:45 now. She scrolled through her contacts, looking for anyone close enough to help, anyone who owed her a favor big enough to drop everything and drive out to the middle of nowhere to rescue her. Nothing. Everyone she knew was either already at work, too far away, or not the kind of person you called in an emergency. That was the price of climbing fast. You didn't build a safety net, you built a ladder. And right now, she was learning the difference. Claire looked out the windshield at the empty stretch of highway. A few cars blew past, their drivers too focused on their own destinations to notice a stranded BMW. The morning sun was starting to burn through the clouds, cold and pale. The kind of light that made everything look stark and unforgiving. 23 minutes. She was about to call a cab company directly, willing to pay double, triple, whatever it took, when she saw the pickup truck. It was old, maybe 15 years, maybe older, with faded blue paint and a dent in the driver's side door that looked like it had a story. The truck slowed as it approached, then pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet behind her, gravel crunching under worn tires. Claire's first instinct was caution. She was a woman alone on a highway, and she'd seen enough news stories to know that not every good Samaritan had good intentions. But desperation has a way of recalculating risk, and right now, she didn't have the luxury of being picky. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered in a way that came from work rather than a gym. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark hair that needed a trim, a flannel shirt layered over a thermal, jeans that had seen better days. But it was his hands Claire noticed first, stained with grease that no amount of scrubbing would ever fully remove. The kind of wear that came from years of working with engines and metal and things that didn't forgive mistakes. He walked toward her car slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. When he got close enough, he tapped gently on the window. Claire hesitated for half a second, then lowered it. "Morning," he said. His voice was quiet, steady, the kind of voice that didn't waste words. "Saw you pulled over. You okay?" "Car died," Claire said, trying to keep the edge of panic out of her tone. "Just died. I have somewhere I need to be in 20 minutes, and I don't—" She stopped herself. He didn't need her life story. The man glanced at the BMW, then back at her. "Mind if I take a look?" "Do you know cars?" Something flickered in his expression, not offense, just a quiet amusement. "Yeah, I know cars." Claire wanted to ask for credentials, for proof, for something that would tell her this stranger wasn't going to make things worse. But the clock was ticking, and she was out of options. "Okay," she said. "Yes, please." He nodded once, then walked around to the front of the car. "Pop the hood." She pulled the release lever, and the hood gave a soft click. The man lifted it with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before, propping it open with the support rod. Then he leaned in, one hand braced on the frame, and just looked. Claire watched him through the windshield, her fingers drumming anxiously on the steering wheel. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't making a show of it. He was just methodical, checking connections, testing hoses, his eyes moving with the kind of focused intelligence that made her reconsider her initial assessment. This wasn't just some guy who changed his own oil. This was someone who understood engines the way a musician understood instruments. After a minute, he straightened up and walked back to her window. "When's the last time you had the battery terminals cleaned?" Claire blinked. "I don't know. The dealership handles all the maintenance." He nodded, like that told him everything he needed to know. "Your battery's fine, but the connection's corroded. It's not getting a clean flow to the starter. I've got tools in my truck. I can clean it off. Might get you running again." "How long will that take?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. Claire checked her phone. 19 minutes until the meeting. If he could really fix it in 10, she could still make it. She'd be sweating, her hair would be a mess, but she'd be there. "Please," she said. "I'll pay you, whatever you want." The man shook his head. "Don't worry about it." He walked back to his truck and returned with a toolbox that looked older than the vehicle itself. Claire watched as he pulled out a wire brush, a wrench, and a small bottle of something she didn't recognize. Then he went to work. She'd never paid much attention to how cars actually functioned. They were tools, appliances, things that either worked or didn't. But watching this stranger move through the engine bay with quiet confidence, she found herself oddly mesmerized. Every movement was deliberate, no wasted motion. He loosened the terminal clamps, brushed away the white-green corrosion with careful strokes, wiped everything down with a rag, then reconnected everything with the same precision. "Try it now," he said. Claire turned the key. The engine turned over once, twice, then caught. The dashboard lights stabilized. The familiar hum of the motor filled the car. Relief hit her so hard she actually felt dizzy. "Oh, thank God!" But then the engine stuttered, coughed. The RPMs dropped sharply. No, come on!" It died again. The man was already back under the hood before she could say anything. This time his expression was different, more focused, a small crease between his eyebrows that suggested he'd just encountered something that didn't fit the pattern. Claire checked her phone. 15 minutes. She could feel the opportunity slipping away, second by second. Even if he got it running right now, she'd hit traffic. She'd arrive flustered, unprepared, off her game. The board would see it in her face before she said a single word. But there was nothing else to do but wait. She watched the stranger work, his hands moving deeper into the engine now, checking things she couldn't name. At one point, he pulled out his phone and used the flashlight to peer into a space she couldn't see from her angle. He was muttering to himself, too quiet for her to hear, but she could see his lips moving, running through possibilities, diagnosing in real time. 10 minutes. "How's it looking?" Claire asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Fuel pump relay's toast," he said without looking up. "That's why it keeps dying. Battery issue was just the first symptom." "Can you fix it?" He was quiet for a moment. "Not here. You'd need a replacement part." Claire's stomach dropped. "So I'm stuck." "For a mechanic, yeah, but I can bypass it. Temporary fix, but it'll get you where you're going." "How temporary?" "Should hold for a day, maybe 2. You'll need to get it into a shop after that." "Do it," Claire said immediately. "Please." He nodded and went back to his truck, this time returning with a small coil of wire and what looked like electrical connectors. Claire had no idea what he was doing as he spliced into the wiring harness, his fingers moving with practiced speed, but she could see the concentration on his face, the kind of focus that came from someone who'd solved problems like this 100 times before. 5 minutes. She was going to be late. Even if he finished right now, she was going to be late. Claire pulled out her phone and typed a quick message to Stephanie. "Running behind. Car trouble. Stall if you can." The response came back almost immediately. "Board's already gathering. I'll try. 3 minutes." The stranger twisted 2 wires together, secured them with electrical tape, then carefully tucked everything back into place. "Try it." Claire turned the key for the 3rd time, expecting nothing. The engine roared to life, smooth, steady, no stuttering, no hesitation. The dashboard looked normal, all the warning lights gone except the one telling her to check the engine soon, which, under the circumstances, she could live with. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You did it!" The man closed the hood and walked back to her window, wiping his hands on a rag that was already beyond saving. "It'll hold, but don't push it. Get it looked at today if you can." Claire was already shifting into drive, her mind racing through the fastest route, calculating whether she could shave 2 minutes off by taking the service road. "Thank you, seriously, thank you so much. How much do I owe you?" "Nothing." "I can't. You just saved my entire career. I have to give you something." "Don't need anything." He started to walk back toward his truck. "Wait." Claire reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet, but he was already shaking his head. "Please, at least let me buy you breakfast, or I'm good." Desperation made her bold. She grabbed the brown paper bag from the passenger seat, the turkey sandwich she'd made at 5:30 that morning, back when the biggest worry in her life was whether the board would like slide 14. "Then take this. I was going to eat it later, but you need it more than I do." The stranger paused. For the first time, something shifted in his expression, a crack in the careful neutrality he'd maintained since pulling over. He looked at the sandwich like it was something precious. "You sure?" "Positive. It's the least I can do." He took it carefully, holding it like it might break. "Thanks." "No, thank you." Claire reached into her bag and pulled out one of her business cards, pressing it into his grease-stained hand. "Claire Morgan, Harborline Motors. If you ever need anything, call me. I mean it." He glanced at the card, then slipped it into his shirt pocket without reading it. "Hope your meeting goes well." Then he turned and walked back to his truck, the sandwich still in his hand. Claire didn't wait to see him drive away. She was already accelerating back onto the highway, her heart pounding, adrenaline burning through her veins. She had 7 minutes to make a 17-mile drive, and she was going to do it, if it killed her. The boardroom at Harborline Motors occupied the entire 23rd floor of the headquarters building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago suburbs sprawling toward the horizon. On a normal day, Claire loved this room. It represented everything she'd worked for: power, influence, the ability to shape decisions that affected thousands of people. Today, it felt like a guillotine. She burst through the doors at 9:07 breathless, her hair slightly windblown, her blouse wrinkled from gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The 12 board members seated around the massive oak table all turned to look at her with varying expressions of irritation and curiosity. "My apologies," Claire said, willing her voice to sound calm and professional instead of like she'd just sprinted from the parking garage. "Car trouble on the highway? It's handled." Richard Pemberton, the silver-haired CEO who'd given her this opportunity in the first place, gestured to the empty chair. "We were beginning to think you'd reconsidered." "Never," Claire said firmly. She set her bag down, pulled out her laptop, and connected it to the presentation system with hands that were only slightly trembling. "Shall we begin?" The next 45 minutes were a blur of slides and data points, of fielding sharp questions from executives who'd been doing this since before she was born, of defending projections and explaining risk mitigation strategies. But Claire had prepared for this. She'd lived with these numbers for months, had stress-tested every assumption, had built contingencies for contingencies, and somewhere around minute 30, she felt the shift in the room. The skeptical expression softened. The pointed questions became genuine curiosity. Richard leaned forward in his chair, and Claire knew she'd hooked him. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Richard smiled. "Well," he said, "that was worth waiting 7 minutes for." Laughter rippled around the table, and Claire felt the tension drain from her shoulders. "The partnership proposal is approved," Richard continued. "Pending legal review, of course. But I think I speak for everyone here when I say this is exactly the kind of forward-thinking strategy Harborline needs. Well done, Claire." The other board members murmured agreement, and Claire let herself feel the victory. She'd done it. Despite the catastrophic morning, despite everything that could have gone wrong, she'd delivered. As the meeting broke up and executives filed out, discussing next steps and implementation timelines, Richard pulled her aside. "That was impressive," he said quietly. "But next time leave 30 minutes earlier." Claire laughed despite herself. "Noted." "I'm serious, though. You've got the talent, Claire. Don't let logistics be what holds you back." "I won't," she promised. She gathered her things and headed down to the parking garage, where her BMW sat in its assigned spot looking innocent, like it hadn't nearly destroyed her entire morning. The engine started smoothly when she turned the key, the temporary fix holding just like the stranger had promised. Claire sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, the adrenaline finally starting to fade into exhaustion. She'd been so focused on the meeting, on saving her presentation, that she hadn't had time to fully process what had happened on that highway. A complete stranger had stopped to help her, had spent over an hour diagnosing and fixing a problem that wasn't his responsibility, had refused payment, refused anything except a sandwich. Who did that anymore? She pulled his business card from her purse. Except, she didn't have his card. She'd given him her card. She didn't even know his name. The thought bothered her more than it should have. Claire wasn't used to owing people, to being in someone's debt without a clear way to repay it. She liked clean transactions, explicit exchanges. This felt unfinished. She started the car and drove to the dealership just like he'd advised. The service manager took one look under the hood and whistled low. "Somebody did a bypass on your fuel pump relay," he said. "Clean work, too. This wasn't a dealership repair." "How long would this have taken you to fix?" Claire asked. The manager checked his computer. "With parts and labor, we'd have had to order the relay probably 2 days before we could even start. Who did this for you?" "Just someone who stopped to help." The manager looked at her like she'd described encountering a unicorn. "Well, whoever they were, they knew what they were doing. This isn't amateur work. I'd hire them." Claire drove home that evening with a replacement relay properly installed and a bill that made her wince, but the car was fine. Perfect, even. The crisis had been averted, the meeting had been a success, and her career was still on track. She should have been celebrating. Instead, she sat in her pristine downtown condo, staring out at the Chicago skyline, thinking about grease-stained hands and a quiet voice and someone who'd refused money but accepted a sandwich like it was worth more. She thought about the way he'd moved under the hood, confident, knowledgeable, completely unbothered by the luxury vehicle or her obvious desperation. Like fixing impossible problems was just something he did. Claire pulled out her phone and opened a search engine. She typed in combinations of keywords: mechanic, Chicago suburbs, fuel pump relay, bypass repair. Nothing useful came up. She didn't even know where to start looking. After 30 minutes of fruitless searching, she gave up. Whoever the stranger was, he'd vanished back into his life, probably never thinking about her again. But Claire couldn't stop thinking about him. Not in a romantic way, at least she didn't think so. It was something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or the uncomfortable recognition that she'd been saved by someone who lived in a completely different world than hers, someone who probably saw her expensive car and tailored suit and made assumptions about who she was. Assumptions that weren't entirely wrong. She'd spent the last 5 years building a life defined by success metrics, promotions, salary increases, proximity to power. She'd sacrificed relationships, hobbies, anything that didn't directly contribute to climbing the ladder. And it had worked. She was exactly where she wanted to be. But sitting alone in her condo that night, eating takeout from a container because she'd never learned to cook properly and didn't have time anyway, Claire found herself wondering what the stranger's life looked like. Did he have family waiting for him when he got home? Friends he met up with on weekends? A life that existed outside the narrow confines of career advancement? She shook her head, annoyed with herself. This was ridiculous. He'd helped her, she'd thanked him, and that was the end of the story. She didn't need to construct some elaborate narrative about a man she'd spent less than 90 minutes with. But when she went to bed that night, she couldn't help pulling his business card, her card, from her purse and looking at it. Her name embossed in crisp black letters. Claire Morgan, Strategic Development, Harborline Motors. He had her contact information. If he ever needed anything, he knew how to reach her. The question was, would he? 3 days passed. Claire threw herself into the partnership implementation, managing the legal review process and coordinating with the supplier teams. The work was demanding, complex, exactly the kind of high-stakes project management that had earned her the VP track in the first place. She didn't think about the stranger. That was a lie. She thought about him at odd moments, waiting for her coffee to brew, stuck in traffic, lying awake at 3 a.m. when her brain wouldn't shut off. But she didn't dwell on it, which was different. On Friday evening, she was working late in her office when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost declined, but something made her answer. "This is Claire Morgan." Silence. Then, "Ms. Morgan, this is Stephanie from Dr. Werner's office. We had you scheduled for a follow-up appointment next week, but the doctor had a cancellation and—" Claire ended the call and set the phone down, frowning. Wrong number. She started to go back to her work when the phone rang again. Different, unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello? Hi, this is probably weird, but you gave me your card a few days ago on I-90? Claire's breath caught. She knew that voice, quiet, steady, careful with words. "I remember," she said, trying to sound professional instead of absurdly relieved. "Is your truck okay?" A pause. "Truck's fine. I'm actually calling because... Okay, this is going to sound strange, but I wanted to say thank you for the sandwich." Claire blinked. "You called to thank me for a sandwich you already thanked me for?" "It was a really good sandwich." Despite everything, Claire smiled. It was turkey and Swiss on wheat. Nothing special. "It was lunch," he said simply. "I hadn't eaten breakfast. Was going to skip lunch, too. I usually do when I'm working. But that sandwich, I don't know. It mattered." There was something in his voice, something deeper than the words, and Claire found herself leaning forward in her chair. "I'm glad it helped." Another pause. "I also wanted to apologize for not introducing myself properly that morning. I was focused on the repair and I didn't think..." He stopped. "Anyway, I'm Ethan. Ethan Cole. It's nice to officially meet you, Ethan. You too." He sounded slightly awkward, like he wasn't used to phone conversations with strangers. "How'd your meeting go?" "I got there with 3 minutes to spare and completely crushed it," Claire said. "Because of you. So really, I should be thanking you again." "We're even then." "We're really not." Claire hesitated, then made a decision. "Can I buy you dinner? Properly this time, not just handing you a sandwich on the side of a highway. The silence stretched long enough that she thought he might refuse. Then, you don't have to do that. I know. I want to. Why? It was a fair question, and Claire didn't have a simple answer. Because you helped me when you didn't have to. Because I'm curious about how you knew how to fix that relay bypass when the dealership said it would take 2 days. And because I've been thinking about that morning all week, and I'd like to understand it better. She could hear him breathing, considering. Finally, okay, yeah, dinner would be nice. They made plans for Sunday evening, a small Italian place halfway between her condo and wherever he lived. Nothing fancy, which was fine. This wasn't a date, it was just closure, understanding, a chance to properly thank someone who'd given her something she couldn't quantify in dollars. When Claire hung up, she was smiling for the first time all week. And somewhere 17 miles away, Ethan Cole stood in his small kitchen, staring at his phone, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. The restaurant Ethan chose was called Lucia's, tucked into a corner of a strip mall in Elk Grove Village that Claire had driven past 100 times without noticing. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and wine bottles as decorations, where the menu was handwritten on a chalkboard, and the owner probably knew half the customers by name. Claire arrived 15 minutes early, which was unlike her. She'd spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear. Too formal would seem condescending, too casual might seem like she wasn't taking this seriously. She'd settled on dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, simple jewelry, her hair down instead of the professional twist she wore to the office. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, watching the door, wondering if Ethan would actually show up or if he'd thought better of this whole thing, wondering why she cared so much. At exactly 6 o'clock, his truck pulled into the parking lot. Ethan climbed out looking exactly like she remembered. Flannel shirt, worn jeans, work boots that had seen better days. But his hair was freshly trimmed, and when he spotted her getting out of her BMW, she could see he'd made an effort too. The flannel was clean, pressed even, no grease stains on his hands. "Hi," he said, walking over with that same quiet confidence she remembered from the highway. Up close, she could see details she'd missed before. Gray eyes that looked tired but kind, a scar along his jawline that was old enough to have faded to silver, calluses on his palms when he shook her hand. "Hi yourself," Claire said, smiling. "Thanks for meeting me." "Thanks for the invitation." He gestured toward the restaurant. "Hope this place is okay. They make the best lasagna in the suburbs, but it's not exactly—" "It's perfect," Claire said quickly. "I'm tired of places where you need a reservation 3 weeks in advance and the portions are sized for pixies." That earned her a small smile. "Yeah, me too." Inside, the owner, a woman in her 60s with an accent that sounded authentically Italian, greeted Ethan like an old friend. "Ethan, and you brought a guest. How wonderful." She grabbed 2 menus and led them to a corner booth, talking the entire way about how Ethan hadn't been in for months, and she'd started to worry. And did he want his usual, or was he feeling adventurous tonight? Claire watched the interaction with fascination. This was a version of Ethan she hadn't seen, relaxed, almost playful, trading jokes in what sounded like passable Italian with a woman who clearly adored him. When they were finally seated and alone, Claire leaned forward. "You speak Italian?" Ethan shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Picked up a little when I was working overseas, just enough to be polite." "Working overseas where?" "Germany, mostly, sometime in Italy. I was with an automotive engineering firm, doing design consultation for European manufacturers." He said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal, but Claire's mental image of him was rapidly recalibrating. "Wait, you're an engineer?" "Was," Ethan corrected. "Past tense." "That explains how you knew how to fix my car. I thought you were a mechanic." "I can do that too." He opened the menu, clearly trying to change the subject. "You should get the lasagna, trust me." But Claire wasn't ready to let it go. How does someone go from engineering consultation in Europe to stopping on highways to help strangers? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the menu, even though she suspected he already knew what he was ordering. When he finally looked up, his expression was carefully neutral. "Life changes. Priorities shift. I needed to be here, doing something different." It was the kind of non-answer that invited more questions, but something in his tone told Claire to back off. This wasn't information he was ready to share with someone he'd met once on a highway and talked to for 5 minutes on the phone. So she pivoted. Well, whatever brought you here, I'm grateful for it. That bypass you did was apparently professional grade work. My dealership mechanic wanted to know who to hire. That got a real smile. It wasn't anything complicated, just pattern recognition. The service manager said it would have taken them 2 days, because they would have done it properly, with the right parts and diagnostics. I just gave you enough to get where you needed to go. He paused. How's the car running now? Perfectly. They replaced the relay, checked everything else. Clean bill of health. Good. The server came by, a young woman who also seemed to know Ethan, and they ordered lasagna for both of them, a bottle of Chianti to share because the owner insisted and Ethan didn't argue. When the wine arrived, Claire poured for both of them, watching Ethan relax incrementally as the evening progressed. So, he said after they'd both taken a sip, strategic development at Harborline Motors. What does that actually mean? It means I spend most of my time trying to convince conservative executives to take calculated risks on emerging markets, Claire said. The meeting you saved was for a partnership with a battery manufacturer. Electric vehicles are the future, but legacy automotive companies move like glaciers. Harborline's trying to get into EVs? Trying is generous. They're dipping a toe in while watching everyone else dive into the deep end. Claire caught herself before launching into a full breakdown of market dynamics. Sorry, I can get carried away talking about work. Don't apologize, it's interesting. Ethan leaned back in the booth. What got you into automotive? Honestly, spite. Claire smiled at his surprised expression. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where girls weren't encouraged to know anything about cars. My dad had this beautiful '67 Mustang he restored, but he never let me touch it. Said I'd break something, so I taught myself everything I could about engines and manufacturing just to prove him wrong. Did it work? He died before I could show him. Claire took another sip of wine, surprised at how easily the words came. Heart attack when I was 20, but by then I was already committed to the industry, figured I'd make something of it. I'm sorry, Ethan said quietly. It was a long time ago. Claire shook her head. Your turn. How did you end up in engineering? Ethan's expression shifted, not quite closed off, but careful. Always liked taking things apart, seeing how they worked. Got a scholarship to Northwestern for mechanical engineering, did well enough to get recruited by a German firm right out of grad school. Spent 6 years overseas working on powertrains and emissions systems. That's impressive. It was a good job, he said, in a tone that suggested the past tense was doing heavy lifting. But you left. Yeah. Claire waited, but he didn't elaborate. The food arrived before she could press, and for a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. The lasagna was, as promised, extraordinary. Layers of pasta and meat and cheese that tasted like someone's grandmother had poured love into every element. This is incredible, Claire said after her third bite. Told you. Ethan looked pleased. Maria, the owner, her family's been making this recipe for 4 generations. She tried to teach me once, but I don't have the patience for cooking. What do you have patience for? He considered the question seriously. Fixing things, building things, anything with my hands where I can see the progress. Like bypassing fuel pump relays on the side of highways. Exactly like that. They talked through the rest of dinner, the conversation flowing more easily than Claire had expected. Ethan asked about Chicago, about what it was like working in the corporate world, about whether she ever missed Ohio. Claire found herself telling him things she didn't usually share, how lonely it could be at the top, how exhausting it was to always be proving herself, how sometimes she wondered if the sacrifices were worth it. Are they? Ethan asked. Worth it? Claire paused with her wine glass halfway to her lips. I don't know yet. Ask me in 10 years. That's honest. I'm trying to be. She met his eyes across the table. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you stop that morning? On the highway. Most people wouldn't have. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the condensation of his water glass. I don't know. You looked like you needed help, and I had the skills, seemed like the right thing to do. It was more than that, though. You spent over an hour working on my car. You refused payment. That's not just being helpful. That's going out of your way for a complete stranger. He looked uncomfortable now, like she'd touched something he wasn't ready to examine. Maybe I just wanted to feel useful. There was a weight to those words, something deeper than the surface meaning, and Claire felt like she'd stumbled onto the edge of something significant. But before she could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor changed, shoulders tensing, jaw tightening. "I'm sorry," he said, standing abruptly. "I need to take this." He walked outside before Claire could respond, the phone already pressed to his ear. Through the window, she could see him pacing in the parking lot, his free hand running through his hair in a gesture that looked like stress or worry or both. Maria appeared at the table with a knowing expression. "Everything okay?" "I think so," Claire said uncertainly. "He got a call." "Ah, probably his daughter." Maria started clearing plates. "That man, he worries too much. But good worry, you know, the kind that means he cares." Claire felt like she'd been hit with ice water. "His daughter?" "Little Lily, 8 years old, sweet as sugar, usually stays with the neighbor when Ethan goes out, but she gets nervous sometimes." Maria patted Claire's shoulder. "He's a good father, best man I know. You're lucky he stopped for you that day." The older woman walked away, leaving Claire sitting alone with this new information, rearranging everything she thought she understood. Ethan had a daughter, an 8-year-old daughter, which meant there was probably a wife or ex-wife somewhere in the picture, a whole life he hadn't mentioned in any of their conversations. Why would he? They were basically strangers. This wasn't a date. It was a thank you dinner. His personal life was none of her business, but it bothered her anyway. Ethan came back inside 5 minutes later, looking apologetic and tired. "I'm sorry about that." "Everything okay?" "Yeah, my daughter was worried because I wasn't home yet. She's staying with a neighbor, but she gets anxious when routines change." He pulled out his wallet. "I should probably head back." "Of course." Claire reached for her purse, but Ethan shook his head. "This one's on me. I invited you to dinner so I could thank you, and I'm accepting your thanks by buying you lasagna. Call it even." They argued about it for another minute before Claire conceded, watching as Ethan left cash on the table, enough to cover the bill and a generous tip. They walked out together into the cool evening air, the parking lot nearly empty now. "Thank you for tonight," Claire said when they reached her car. "I really enjoyed it." "Me too." Ethan hesitated, then said, "I know I didn't talk much about myself. It's not that I don't trust you, You don't owe me your life story," Claire interrupted gently. "We barely know each other." "Right, yeah." But he looked relieved. "Although, if you want to know each other better, maybe we could do this again sometime. When I don't have to run off in the middle of dessert?" Claire smiled, ignoring the small flutter in her chest that definitely wasn't appropriate for a casual acquaintance. "I'd like that." They exchanged phone numbers properly this time, and Claire watched him drive away in his old truck before getting into her BMW. She sat there for a moment, processing the evening, trying to understand why she felt simultaneously satisfied and unsettled. Ethan Cole was a good man. That much was obvious. Kind, skilled, devoted to his daughter. But there was something underneath all that, something he was carrying that made him help strangers on highways and refuse payment and say things like, "Maybe I just wanted to feel useful." Claire wanted to understand what that something was. She started her car and headed home, already planning when she could reasonably text him again without seeming too eager. 3 days later, they met for coffee. Then lunch the following week. Then a walk through Millennium Park on a Saturday afternoon when Ethan's daughter was at a birthday party and he had a few hours free. The conversations got easier, more natural. Ethan started sharing small details about his life. His daughter Lily loved drawing and wanted a dog they couldn't afford. Their apartment was small but comfortable. He worked odd jobs fixing things for people in the neighborhood to make ends meet. But he still didn't talk about the engineering career he'd abandoned, or why he'd come back to Chicago, or what had happened to Lily's mother. And Claire didn't push, even though the questions burned in the back of her mind every time they met. She told herself it didn't matter. They were friends, or becoming friends, and everyone had parts of their past they didn't want to discuss. She had her own, failed relationships, career decisions she wasn't proud of, the complicated mess of her family history. But the more time she spent with Ethan, the more she wanted to know everything. It came to a head on a Tuesday evening in late October. Claire had texted Ethan about a problem with her building's parking garage. The gate mechanism was malfunctioning, and the property management company was quoting 2 weeks for repairs. Within an hour, Ethan had shown up with his toolbox and fixed it in 20 minutes. "You really didn't have to do that," Claire said as they rode the elevator up to her condo. She'd invited him in for a drink as thanks, and he'd accepted after checking his phone to make sure Lily was settled with homework. "I was in the area anyway," Ethan said, which they both knew was a lie. He lived on the opposite side of the city. Claire's condo was everything his life probably wasn't: sleek, modern, minimalist in a way that suggested professional success. Floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, a kitchen that looked like it had never been used for actual cooking. Ethan stood in the entrance, taking it all in with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Nice place," he said finally. "Thanks. It's too big for one person, but the location was perfect for work." Claire pulled 2 beers from the fridge. "I'm barely here anyway." They sat on the balcony looking out at the Chicago skyline as the sun set in shades of orange and pink. For a while, neither of them spoke, just existing in the comfortable silence that had become familiar over the past few weeks. Then Ethan said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you keep inviting me to things? Dinner, coffee, walks. We don't exactly run in the same circles." Claire turned to look at him, surprised by the directness. "Does there have to be a reason?" "Usually, yeah." She considered how to answer honestly without revealing too much. "I like talking to you. You're different from the people I usually spend time with. You don't care about quarterly earnings or market positioning or office politics. You just exist. It's refreshing." "I'm a novelty," Ethan said flatly. "No, you're real." Claire set her beer down. "Everyone in my life wants something from me, or wants to be associated with me because of what I can do for their career. You wanted a sandwich and said thank you. That's it. No ulterior motive, no networking, just basic human decency. Do you know how rare that is?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "You think I don't want anything from you? Do you?" "No," he said it firmly. "But I also don't want you to think I'm some kind of saint. I'm not. I've made plenty of mistakes, hurt people I cared about, failed at things that mattered. The reason I stopped on that highway wasn't nobility. It was guilt." Claire felt her breath catch. "Guilt about what?" "About having skills I'm not using. About watching people struggle with problems I could solve but don't, because I've convinced myself that staying small and invisible is safer than taking risks." He looked at her directly. "You asked me once why I left engineering. The truth is, I didn't leave. I ran. My wife died 4 years ago. Cancer. By the time they caught it, there was nothing anyone could do. And I was so focused on my career, on the next project, on proving myself that I missed it. Missed her getting sick, missed the signs, missed everything until it was too late." The words hit Claire like a physical blow. "Ethan, after she died, I couldn't go back to that life. Couldn't keep pretending that designing engines for luxury cars mattered when I'd failed at the one thing that actually did. So I quit, moved back to Chicago to be near her family, and focused on raising Lily. That's it. That's the whole story." Claire didn't know what to say. Every instinct told her to offer comfort, to say something reassuring, but the raw honesty in Ethan's voice suggested he didn't want platitudes. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for your loss, for what you went through." "Thanks." Ethan took a long drink of his beer. "I don't talk about it much. Most people don't know what to do with that information." "Is that why you help people? Random strangers on highways?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to feel like I'm worth something again." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Either way, that's why I stopped for you. Not because I'm a good person, but because I needed to believe I still could be." Claire felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of shared pain even though their experiences were completely different. "You are a good person, Ethan. Whatever you think you failed at, raising a daughter alone while dealing with grief and still finding time to fix parking garage gates for acquaintances, that's not nothing. That's everything. You don't know me well enough to say that." Then let me get to know you better. Ethan looked at her, really looked, and Claire saw the moment he understood what she was offering. Not pity, not charity, just genuine human connection with someone who saw past the grease stains and the tragic backstory to the person underneath. Okay, he said quietly. Yeah, I'd like that. They talked for another hour, this time without the careful boundaries they'd maintained before. Ethan told her about his wife Sarah, about how they'd met in college and built a life together that felt invincible until it wasn't, about Lily's nightmares in the first year after losing her mother, about learning to braid hair and pack school lunches and be both parents at once. Claire told him about the loneliness of success, about relationships that had failed because she couldn't make space for them, about waking up at 30 and realizing she had everything she'd worked for and no one to share it with. When Ethan finally left, well past midnight, Claire stood on her balcony for a long time afterward, thinking about the strange way life connected people. A broken car, a stranger with the right skills, a sandwich that meant more than it should have. She pulled out her phone and opened a search engine, this time with actual information to work with. Ethan Cole, automotive engineering, patents. The results loaded, and Claire felt her breath catch. There were dozens of hits, technical papers, patent filings, industry articles. Ethan hadn't just been an engineer, he'd been one of the best. Credited with innovations in hybrid powertrains, efficiency systems that were now industry standard, design work that had won awards. And he'd walked away from all of it. Claire clicked through article after article, building a picture of who Ethan had been before grief had redefined his entire existence. The more she read, the more one thought crystallized in her mind. Harborline Motors was about to launch their most ambitious EV project in company history. They needed someone who understood both the technical challenges and the human cost of innovation. Someone who could design systems that worked in the real world, not just on paper. Someone exactly like Ethan Cole. Claire closed her laptop and stared out at the city lights, an idea forming that felt both perfect and terrifying. She had no idea if Ethan would even consider coming back to engineering. But if there was a way to give him something that felt worth risking for, something that accommodated his life as a father, that didn't demand he sacrifice everything again, maybe he'd take it. Maybe they could help each other in ways that went far beyond fixing cars on highways. She fell asleep that night with her mind already planning, already calculating, already hoping that the man who'd given her a second chance at her career might be willing to take one himself. Claire didn't sleep well that night. Her mind kept circling back to the patents, the articles, the technical papers with Ethan's name attached to innovations that had reshaped an entire industry. By 3 a.m, she'd filled half a notebook with ideas, crossing out most of them, refining the ones that felt possible. The problem was simple. Harborline needed talent. Ethan had talent. But asking him to come back to the world he'd deliberately left felt like asking him to reopen wounds that had barely healed. She needed to be careful, strategic. This couldn't feel like charity or pity. It had to be real. An actual opportunity that made sense for both parties, something he could walk into with dignity and walk away from if it didn't work. By the time dawn broke over the skyline, Claire had a plan. She waited 3 days before bringing it up, wanting to make sure their friendship was on solid ground after Ethan's confession about Sarah. They texted regularly, nothing heavy, just small observations about their days, photos of things that made them laugh. Ethan sent her a picture of Lily's drawing of a dragon, and Claire sent back a photo of the catastrophically bad coffee in the executive break room. Normal things, easy things. On Friday afternoon, she called him. "Are you free tomorrow morning, around 10? "Should be. Lily has a play date at 11, but I'm clear until then." "What's up?" "I want to show you something, at Harborline." There was a pause. "Your office?" "Not exactly, just trust me." Another pause, longer this time. "Okay, yeah, I'll be there." Claire spent Friday evening preparing, running through scenarios and counter-arguments, trying to anticipate every objection Ethan might raise. She talked to Richard Pemberton first thing Saturday morning, catching him in his office where he spent most weekends reviewing quarterly projections. "I need to pitch you something unconventional," she said, sitting across from him without preamble. Richard set down his reading glasses. "I'm listening." "The EV project needs a technical lead who actually understands propulsion systems at a fundamental level. Someone who can see problems before they become catastrophic, who can innovate under constraints. We've been interviewing candidates for 3 months and no one's been right. Agreed. Your point? I found someone. He's not going to look like what you're expecting, and he's going to have conditions that don't fit our normal hiring parameters. But he's exactly what this project needs. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying her with the sharp intelligence that had made him CEO. This is the man who fixed your car, isn't it? The one you've been having coffee with. Claire felt her cheeks warm. Of course Richard knew. He made it his business to know everything about his senior executives. His name is Ethan Cole. He has 6 years of experience with European manufacturers, holds patents on hybrid powertrain systems, and published research that's still being cited. He left the industry 4 years ago after his wife died, and he's been raising his 8-year-old daughter alone ever since. Why would someone like that want to come back? I don't know if he does. That's what I'm trying to find out. Claire pulled up Ethan's professional history on her tablet and slid it across the desk. But if there's a way to make it work, flexible hours, remote options when possible, real work-life balance, I think he'd be worth 10 conventional candidates. Richard scrolled through the information, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up. Bring him in. Let me meet him. But Claire, if this goes sideways, if he's not what you think he is, it reflects on your judgment. Understood? Understood. And Claire? Be careful mixing personal relationships with professional decisions. I know you're smarter than that, but I'll say it anyway. This isn't about our friendship, Claire said firmly. This is about recognizing talent where others wouldn't think to look. Richard studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 10 o'clock? He'll be here. Ethan arrived at Harborline headquarters at exactly 10, driving his weathered pickup into a parking lot full of luxury vehicles and looking completely out of place. Claire met him in the lobby, watching him take in the soaring glass atrium, the modern art installations, the implicit message that this building costs more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Impressive, he said, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable. Come on, there's something I want you to see. She led him past security, through corridors lined with photos of classic Harborline models, into an elevator that required a keycard for access to the upper floors. Ethan didn't ask questions, just followed with the quiet patience she'd come to recognize as his default mode when uncertain. But she didn't take him to her office or a conference room. Instead, she brought him to the research and development wing, a section of the building most employees never saw. The lab space was massive, workbenches and diagnostic equipment and prototype vehicles in various states of assembly. Engineers moved between stations, their conversations a mix of technical jargon and creative problem-solving. Ethan stopped in the doorway, his entire body going still. Claire watched his eyes track across the space, cataloging everything with the focused attention of someone who understood exactly what he was seeing. This is the EV Development Lab, Claire said quietly. We're 18 months into a project that's supposed to revolutionize Harborline's position in the electric market. But we're stuck. The battery integration keeps creating thermal management problems. The powertrain efficiency is below projections, and every solution creates 2 new problems. Ethan walked further into the lab, drawn to a prototype chassis like a magnet. He didn't touch anything, but Claire could see him analyzing, his mind working through systems and connections. One of the engineers, a woman named Jennifer, who'd been with the project from the start, looked up and frowned at the stranger in street clothes. Can I help you? He's with me, Claire said. Jennifer, this is Ethan Cole. Ethan, Jennifer Park, our current technical lead. Jennifer's frown deepened. Cole? Wait. Ethan Cole, who published the Stuttgart paper on hybrid thermal dynamics? Ethan looked surprised. You read that? Read it. I cited it in my thesis. Jennifer set down her tablet and walked over, her suspicion replaced by professional interest. That paper changed how I think about heat dissipation in compact systems. What are you doing here? I'm not entirely sure, Ethan admitted, glancing at Claire. I invited him to consult, Claire said smoothly, fresh eyes on the integration problem. Jennifer looked between them, clearly curious but professional enough not to press. Well, if you want fresh eyes, start here. She pulled up schematics on a large monitor. We're getting thermal spikes in the battery pack during rapid discharge cycles. Every cooling solution we've tried either adds too much weight or creates new failure points. Ethan studied the schematic in silence, his expression intent. Claire could practically see the gears turning in his head, patterns emerging from the chaos of data. After a full minute, he pointed to a section of the design. You're routing the coolant wrong. See here? You're fighting the natural heat distribution instead of working with it. If you reverse this flow path and added a secondary buffer here, he traced a line with his finger, you'd reduce the peak temperature by at least 15% without adding weight. Jennifer's eyes widened. That's actually brilliant. Why didn't we see that? Because you're too close to it. You've been staring at this design for months, so you see what you expect to see instead of what's actually there. Ethan looked uncomfortable with the attention. It's an easy fix. Any competent engineer would spot it eventually. We've had 6 competent engineers looking at this for 3 months, Jennifer said flatly. You saw it in 60 seconds. Claire watched Ethan process this, saw the moment when professional pride started to war with the instinct to downplay his abilities. Before he could deflect again, another engineer called Jennifer over to look at something, leaving Claire and Ethan alone near the prototype. Why did you bring me here? Ethan asked quietly. Because you belong here, not necessarily in this building or this company, but doing this kind of work, using your brain for something more than fixing parking gates and helping strangers. I'm happy fixing parking gates. Are you? Claire challenged. Really? Because when you looked at that schematic, you lit up. I saw it. This is what you were meant to do. Ethan's jaw tightened. I told you why I left. I know. And I'm not asking you to go back to that life, the one where work consumed everything else. I'm asking if there's a version of this that could work, where you still get to be Lily's dad first, but you also get to use the gifts you have. Claire took a breath. Harborline is looking for a technical lead on this project. Flexible hours, remote work when it makes sense, no expectation that you sacrifice your daughter for the job. And before you say anything, this isn't charity. We genuinely need someone with your expertise. And I will be professionally embarrassed if you solve our thermal problem in 1 minute and then walk away. Ethan stared at her. You're serious? Completely. Claire, I haven't worked in this field for 4 years. I'm not current on the latest technologies. I don't have connections anymore. You just solved a problem 6 engineers couldn't crack in 60 seconds while being polite about it. Claire moved closer, lowering her voice. I'm not asking you to decide right now. But meet with Richard Pemberton, our CEO. Have a conversation. See if there's something here that feels possible. If it doesn't work, nothing changes. We're still friends. But if it does work, you could build something that matters while also building a life that works for Lily. Isn't that worth exploring? Before Ethan could answer, Richard appeared in the doorway of the lab. He'd clearly been watching from his office via the security cameras, waiting for the right moment to make his entrance. Classic Richard. Mr. Cole, he said, extending his hand. Richard Pemberton. Claire speaks very highly of you. Ethan shook his hand, clearly thrown by the CEO's sudden appearance. Sir, I understand you have some thoughts on our thermal management challenges. Walk me through them. What followed was 20 minutes of technical discussion that left Claire feeling simultaneously proud and completely out of her depth. Ethan explained his observation about the coolant routing with the kind of clear, methodical thinking that made complex problems seem obvious in retrospect. Richard asked sharp questions, pushing back on assumptions, testing whether Ethan's confidence was backed by genuine understanding. It was. By the time they finished, Richard was smiling, not his polite executive smile, but the genuine expression he wore when he'd found something valuable. Mr. Cole, I'd like to offer you a consulting position. 3 months, part-time, work from home when possible with on-site time as needed. We'll pay you consultant rates, which are considerably higher than staff positions, and you'll report directly to Claire on the EV integration project. If it works out, we can discuss something more permanent. If it doesn't, you walk away with professional experience you can leverage elsewhere and enough money to make it worth your time. Ethan looked at Claire, then back at Richard. I have a daughter. She's my first priority. That's non-negotiable. Understood. Claire mentioned that. We're not asking you to be here 60 hours a week. We're asking you to apply your expertise when and where it matters most. Think of it as strategic intervention rather than constant presence. And if there's a school event or an emergency, then you handle it, Richard said firmly. I have 3 grown children, Mr. Cole. I remember what it was like trying to balance career and family. I won't pretend we're perfect at accommodating parents, but I will commit to making this work if you're willing to try. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and Claire held her breath. She'd pushed him into this corner, had used their friendship and his obvious love for engineering to manipulate him into considering something he'd run from. If he said no, if he walked away feeling betrayed, I need to think about it, Ethan said finally. Talk to my daughter. Make sure this is right for both of us. Can I give you an answer Monday? Absolutely. Richard pulled out a business card and handed it over. My direct line. Call any time. After Richard left, Claire walked Ethan back to the parking lot in silence. The autumn air was crisp, leaves skittering across the pavement in small eddies of wind. When they reached his truck, Ethan turned to face her. You ambushed me, he said. I know. I'm sorry. No, you're not. Claire smiled despite herself. Okay, I'm not. But I'm sorry if I overstepped. If this feels like I'm trying to fix you or change you. It doesn't feel like that, Ethan interrupted. It feels like you see something in me I'm not sure exists anymore. And I don't know if that's exciting or terrifying. Can it be both? He laughed, some of the tension draining from his shoulders. Yeah, it can definitely be both. He looked back at the building, at the glass and steel monument to corporate ambition. I need to talk to Lily. She's the one who'll be affected if my schedule changes, if I'm distracted by work again. I won't make decisions that impact her without her input. That's fair? Good, even. Can I ask you something? Ethan's expression was serious now. Why does this matter so much to you? And don't say it's just about finding the right person for the job. There's something else. Claire considered lying, or deflecting, or giving him the professional answer. But Ethan had been honest with her about Sarah, about his grief, about everything that mattered. He deserved the same. Because when you stopped on that highway, you didn't just fix my car. You reminded me that there are still people who help without expecting anything in return, who see a problem and solve it because that's who they are. And in the weeks since, you've become someone I actually look forward to talking to. Someone real in a world that feels increasingly fake. She met his eyes. If I can give you back even a fraction of what you gave me, a chance to use your gifts, to feel valuable, to build something while still being the father Lily needs, then yeah, it matters. Because you matter. To me. As a friend. Ethan held her gaze for a long moment, and Claire couldn't quite read what she saw there. Finally, he nodded. I'll call you Monday, he said. Either way. Either way, Claire agreed. She watched him drive away, then walked back into the building, feeling like she'd just set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. For better or worse, the trajectory of Ethan Cole's life had just shifted, and she was the one who'd pushed it. The question was whether he'd thank her or never forgive her. That weekend felt endless. Claire tried to focus on work, on the 100 other things demanding her attention, but her mind kept drifting to Ethan, to whether he was talking to Lily, whether he was reconsidering everything she'd said, whether Monday's call would end their friendship before it had really begun. She almost texted him a dozen times, but forced herself to wait. This had to be his decision, made without pressure or influence. She'd already pushed hard enough. Sunday evening, her phone rang. Ethan. Claire's heart jumped into her throat. Hello? Hey. Ethan sounded tired but not upset. I know I said Monday, but I figured you were probably going crazy waiting. I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been completely calm and rational all weekend. Liar, she could hear the smile in his voice. I talked to Lily, showed her pictures of the lab, explained what the job would mean, told her it might change our routine sometimes. Claire held her breath. What did she say? She asked if it would make me happy. I said I didn't know, but it might make me feel more like myself again, and she said, his voice caught slightly. She said she wanted me to try, because I've been sad for a long time, and she misses when I used to get excited about things. Ethan, She's 8 years old, Claire. 8. And she's been watching me just exist for 4 years, doing the minimum, playing it safe. What kind of example is that? What kind of life am I teaching her to build? You're teaching her that people matter more than careers. That's not nothing. I know, but maybe I can teach her both. That you can care about people and still do work that matters. That you don't have to choose between being present and being ambitious. He took a breath. So yeah, I want to try. The consulting position. 3 months. Let's see if I still know how to do this. Relief washed over Claire so powerfully she had to sit down. You won't regret this. I might, Ethan said honestly, but I'll regret not trying even more. When do I start? How's Wednesday? They talked for another 20 minutes, working through logistics and schedules and what Ethan would need to feel comfortable. Claire took notes, already planning how to make this transition as smooth as possible, how to set him up for success. When they finally hung up, she immediately texted Richard. He's in. Starts Wednesday. The response came back within seconds. Excellent. Don't screw this up. Claire smiled at her phone. She had no intention of screwing this up. This wasn't just about finding talent for a project, though it was definitely that. This was about proving that people deserved second chances, that grief didn't have to be a permanent sentence, that there were versions of success that didn't require sacrificing everything else. This was about Ethan getting to be whole again. And maybe, just maybe, about Claire learning what it looked like to care about someone's well-being as much as their productivity. Wednesday morning arrived with Claire feeling more nervous than she'd been for her own first day at Harborline. She'd prepared everything meticulously: laptop, security credentials, a full orientation packet, workspace set up in a quiet corner of the development lab where Ethan could focus without constant interruption. She'd also warned Jennifer and the rest of the engineering team that they were getting a consultant who might need time to acclimate, who hadn't worked in the field for several years, who should be treated with respect but not deference. Jennifer had just smiled knowingly. You like him? Professionally, Claire said firmly. Sure, professionally. Jennifer didn't sound convinced. Don't worry, we'll take care of him. Ethan arrived at 8:30, 15 minutes early, wearing clothes that were clearly new, dark jeans without grease stains, a button-down shirt that still had crease lines from the package, work boots that looked uncomfortable because they weren't broken in yet. His hair was freshly cut, his face cleanly shaved, and he looked simultaneously professional and absolutely terrified. You didn't have to buy new clothes, Claire said as she met him in the lobby. Yes, I did. I wasn't showing up to a corporate office in my regular work clothes. He tugged at his collar. Does this look okay? You look great, also extremely uncomfortable. That's accurate. Claire led him upstairs, walking him through security protocols and introducing him to people along the way. Ethan was polite, professional, clearly making an effort even though she could see the anxiety in the set of his shoulders. This world, corporate, formal, full of hierarchies and politics, was nothing like the hands-on engineering work he'd done in Europe, and everything about his body language said he knew it. When they reached the development lab, Jennifer was waiting with the rest of the team. 6 engineers, all of them brilliant, all of them curious about the mysterious consultant who'd impressed the CEO. Everyone, this is Ethan Cole, Claire said. He's going to be consulting on the thermal integration challenges. Ethan, this is your team. The introductions went smoothly enough, but Claire could see Ethan cataloging the dynamics. Who was skeptical, who was friendly, who was sizing him up as competition. When they finally got him settled at his workstation with access to all the project files, she pulled Jennifer aside. Give him space to find his rhythm, Claire said quietly. He's brilliant, but he's also out of practice with corporate environments. I know, we've got him. Jennifer paused. He's lucky to have you in his corner. I'm lucky he took a chance on this. Claire forced herself to leave the lab and focus on her own work, though every instinct wanted to hover and make sure Ethan was okay. This had to be his success or failure on his own terms. She couldn't protect him from every uncomfortable moment. But at noon, Jennifer knocked on her office door with an expression Claire couldn't quite read. Problem? Claire asked, her stomach sinking. No. Opposite of problem. Jennifer came in and closed the door. In 4 hours, Ethan completely redesigned the battery thermal management system. Not just tweaked it, fundamentally reconceived how we approach the whole problem. He's currently at a whiteboard explaining it to the team, and I think half of them are in love. Claire felt something warm bloom in her chest. It's good? It's revolutionary. If it works the way he's describing, we just leapfrogged every competitor in efficiency and safety. Jennifer leaned against the door. Where the hell did you find him? Broken down on the side of I-90. Seriously? Completely seriously. Jennifer shook her head in amazement. Well, however it happened, don't let him go. We need him on this project. After Jennifer left, Claire allowed herself a moment of pure satisfaction. Ethan was going to be okay. Better than okay. He was going to thrive. She didn't visit the lab until 4 o'clock, when she had a legitimate reason to check on project progress. What she found was Ethan surrounded by engineers, all of them talking over each other with the kind of excited energy that came from breakthrough moments. The whiteboard was covered in diagrams and equations, and Ethan was in the middle of it all, marker in hand, looking more alive than Claire had ever seen him. He caught her eye across the room and smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, and Claire felt something shift in her chest that had nothing to do with professional pride. She was in trouble. Not the kind of trouble that could be solved with project management or strategic planning. The kind that came from realizing you'd started to care about someone in ways that went far beyond friendship, in ways that could complicate everything you'd carefully built. But watching Ethan explain his design to an engineer half his age with patience and enthusiasm, seeing him become the person he was meant to be, Claire couldn't bring herself to regret it. Whatever happened next, this moment was worth it. The first month passed in a blur of progress that felt almost too good to be true. Ethan's thermal management redesign didn't just work. It exceeded every projection. The battery pack ran cooler, charged faster, and the entire powertrain system suddenly made sense in ways it hadn't before. Jennifer started calling him the Battery Whisperer, and the nickname stuck. But Claire watched carefully, looking for signs of strain. Ethan kept his hours reasonable, left by 3:30 most days to pick up Lily from school, worked from home twice a week. He'd set boundaries from day one and held them firmly, even when Richard suggested he might want to attend an evening strategy meeting. I have dinner with my daughter at 6, Ethan had said simply. That's not negotiable. Richard had looked surprised, then thoughtful. Fair enough, we'll schedule around you. Claire had felt absurdly proud in that moment, watching Ethan refuse to compromise on what mattered. This was exactly what she'd hoped for, someone who could do brilliant work without sacrificing everything else. What she hadn't anticipated was how much she'd start looking forward to seeing him every day. It started small. She'd find excuses to walk by the development lab just to check on progress. Ethan would look up from whatever he was working on and smile, and something warm would settle in Claire's chest. They'd grab coffee together most mornings, talking through project challenges or just comparing notes on their wildly different lives. Claire learned that Lily wanted to be a veterinarian, that Ethan made the world's worst pancakes but tried every Sunday anyway, that he taught himself piano during the pandemic, and still played when he couldn't sleep. Ethan learned that Claire had never traveled outside North America, that she'd been engaged once in her 20s to someone who'd wanted her to choose between him and her career, that she still felt guilty about not visiting her mother more often, even though the woman drove her crazy within 15 minutes of conversation. The friendship deepened naturally, comfortably, until Claire realized she was sharing things with Ethan she'd never told anyone, and he was doing the same. I'm worried about Lily, Ethan said one morning over coffee, his hands wrapped around the cup like he needed the warmth. She's doing better with me working. She's proud of me, keeps telling her friends her dad is building electric cars. But she's also started asking about her mom more. Questions I don't always know how to answer. Like what? Like whether Sarah would be proud of her. Whether she remembers things right, or if she's making up memories to fill in the gaps. Ethan's voice was quiet. She was 4 when Sarah died. Her memories are fading, and I don't know how to keep them alive without making it worse. Claire thought about it for a moment. What if you made something together? A memory book? Or a collection of stories? Something Lily could add to so she feels like she's participating in remembering instead of just being told about someone she's losing. Ethan looked at her with an expression that made her chest tight. That's actually really good. How did you? I lost my dad young, remember? I know what it's like to feel like you're supposed to grieve someone you barely knew. Claire set down her coffee. The things that helped me most were the stories, not the sanitized, perfect father versions, but the real ones. The time he accidentally locked himself out of the house in his underwear, the way he sang off key in the shower, the small human details that made him feel real instead of like a saint I could never measure up to. Sarah wasn't a saint, Ethan said softly. She was stubborn and terrible at directions, and once tried to make Thanksgiving dinner from a cookbook written in French she couldn't read. The turkey was, let's just say we ordered pizza, Claire laughed. Those are the stories Lily needs. Yeah, Ethan smiled, but his eyes were distant. You know what the hardest part is? I'm starting to be okay, like genuinely okay. I wake up most mornings now and don't immediately feel the weight of everything I lost. And then I feel guilty for feeling okay, like I'm betraying Sarah by moving forward. That's not betrayal, that's healing. Is it? Because some days it feels like I'm just really good at forgetting. Claire reached across the table and touched his hand, just briefly, just enough to ground him. You're not forgetting, you're integrating. There's a difference. Sarah's part of who you are, part of what made you the father Lily has. But you're also allowed to build new things, to be happy again. She'd want that. You didn't know her. No, but I know you. And the man who stopped to help a stranger, who raises his daughter with that much care, who worries about whether he's honoring his wife's memory correctly, that man was shaped by someone who loved him enough to make him want to be better. So yeah, I think Sarah would want you to be happy. I think she'd want you to live instead of just existing. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the coffee cup. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright. Thank you for saying that. For all of this, really. I don't think I'd be here without you pushing me. You'd be here. Maybe it would have taken longer, but you'd have found your way back eventually. I'm not so sure about that. He glanced at his watch and stood. I should get to the lab. Jennifer wants to run thermal tests on the new configuration. After he left, Claire sat alone in the break room for another 10 minutes, trying to identify the feeling that had been growing steadily over the past few weeks. It wasn't quite attraction, or maybe it was, but it was more complicated than that. Ethan represented something she'd never had. Proof that you could be exceptional at your work and still prioritize the people you loved. That success didn't have to mean sacrifice. That there were men in the world who chose differently, and she was terrified that she was starting to want that for herself. The project accelerated through November. Ethan's redesign was approved for prototype development, which meant longer hours and higher stakes. Richard was thrilled, already talking about investor presentations and market projections. Jennifer's team was working overtime to translate Ethan's theoretical work into actual components. And Ethan was struggling. Claire noticed it in small ways first. He started showing up earlier, staying later. The twice-weekly work-from-home days disappeared. He looked tired, distracted, like he was trying to be in two places at once and failing at both. It came to a head on a Tuesday in early December. Claire was leaving the office at 7, late for her, though early by most executive standards, when she passed the development lab and saw lights still on. She looked inside and found Ethan alone at his workstation, staring at his laptop with an expression of pure frustration. "Hey," she said, tapping on the doorframe. "What are you still doing here?" Ethan looked up, startled. "Oh, hey, just finishing some calculations for tomorrow's presentation. It's 7 o'clock. I know. I lost track of time." He rubbed his eyes. "Lily's at my neighbor's. I told her I'd be home by 6. Ethan, I know. I know I said I wouldn't do this. There's so much work, and the prototype deadline got moved up, and I want to make sure everything's perfect." He closed the laptop with more force than necessary. "I'm screwing this up already." Claire walked into the lab and sat on the edge of his desk. "You're not screwing anything up. You're doing exactly what everyone does when they care about their work. You're pushing too hard. But that's what we're here to catch. What does your schedule look like tomorrow? Prototype review at 9, thermal testing at 11, design meeting at 2, and I'm supposed to have revised calculations ready for all of it. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home right now and have dinner with Lily. Tomorrow morning, you're working from home. Send me your calculations and I'll have Jennifer's team run verification overnight. You come in at noon, fresh and prepared, and you'll nail every meeting because you won't be exhausted. Claire, I can't ask the team to. You're not asking. I'm directing. That's what management does. We redistribute load so no one burns out, especially not in the first 2 months. She stood up. Go home, Ethan. Your daughter needs you more than this prototype does. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him. Okay, yeah, you're right. He started packing up his laptop. I'm sorry, I promised I wouldn't let this take over, and here I am. You're human. You're excited about the work and you want to do well. That's not a character flaw. But you also set boundaries for good reasons, and I'm going to help you keep them. Deal? Deal. Ethan paused at the door. Claire, thank you for not letting me become the person I used to be. After he left, Claire spent another hour coordinating with Jennifer's team, making sure Ethan's calculations would be ready without anyone having to pull an all-nighter. It meant calling in favors and shuffling priorities, but she didn't care. Watching Ethan start to slip back into old patterns had sent a jolt of fear through her. This had to work. Not just the project, but the balance. Because if Ethan burned out, if he sacrificed his relationship with Lily for the sake of meeting deadlines, Claire would never forgive herself for bringing him back to this world. The next morning, Ethan sent her a text at 8:30. Lily and I made pancakes. They were terrible, but she said she loved them. Thank you for last night. Claire smiled at her phone and typed back, terrible pancakes with your daughter beats perfect calculations alone. Remember that. His response came a minute later. I will. The prototype review went flawlessly. Ethan presented his thermal calculations with the kind of clarity that came from being well-rested and confident. The testing results exceeded expectations. Richard started talking about accelerating the timeline for investor presentations, and Claire had to gently remind him that they needed to maintain sustainable pace. We can't rush brilliance, she told him in his office after the review, and we can't burn out our best talent in the first quarter. Richard gave her a sharp look. You're very protective of him. I'm protective of the project's success. Ethan is critical to that success. Therefore, I'm protective of his well-being. That's just good management. Is it? Richard leaned back in his chair. Or is it something else? Claire felt her cheeks warm. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm observing that you've become personally invested in Ethan Cole's success in ways that go beyond professional interest, which is fine, as long as it doesn't compromise your judgment. It doesn't. Good, because we need both of you functioning at your best. Richard's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think you were right about him. He's exactly what this project needed. I just hope you know what you're doing on the personal side. Claire left his office feeling unsettled. Was she that transparent? Could everyone see what she was only starting to acknowledge to herself? That Ethan had become more than a friend, more than a professional colleague, something she didn't have words for yet? She pushed the thought away and focused on work. There would be time to examine her feelings later. Right now they had a prototype to build and a market to disrupt. December brought its own challenges. The prototype was scheduled for completion right before the holidays, which meant everyone was working extended hours despite Claire's best efforts to maintain balance. Ethan held his boundaries better this time, but she could see the strain in his face, the way he'd check his phone constantly to make sure Lily was okay. She's asking why I can't come to her school concert, Ethan told Claire one afternoon, his voice tight with frustration. It's Thursday at 2, and I have the investor pre-brief scheduled for 1:30. Reschedule the pre-brief. Richard said it's critical. Richard can wait an hour. Your daughter's concert can't be rescheduled, and she'll remember whether you were there. Claire pulled up her calendar. I'll move the pre-brief to 3:30. You go to the concert, come back energized, and you'll do better in the presentation anyway. Ethan looked at her like she'd performed a miracle. You'd do that? I just did. Email me the school details and I'll make sure you're blocked off from 1 to 3. On Thursday, Claire found herself thinking about Ethan sitting in a school auditorium, watching his daughter perform. She imagined him with a phone full of photos, clapping too loud, being exactly the father Lily needed him to be. The image made her smile. The pre-brief went fine when it finally happened. Ethan was relaxed, confident, clearly riding the high of having made his daughter happy. Richard noticed the difference in his demeanor and asked what had changed. "I went to my daughter's concert," Ethan said simply. "Reminded me what actually matters." Richard had just nodded, but Claire caught him looking at her with an expression that suggested he understood more than he was saying. The prototype was completed on December 20th, 2 days ahead of schedule. The entire engineering team gathered in the lab as the first test vehicle hummed to life, its electric motor spinning smoothly, the thermal management system performing exactly as designed. When the diagnostics came back green across the board, everyone cheered. Ethan stood slightly apart from the celebration, watching the vehicle with an expression Claire couldn't quite read. She walked over to stand beside him. "You did it," she said quietly. "We did it. This wasn't just me. It wouldn't exist without you. You know that, right?" Ethan turned to look at her, and Claire saw something complicated in his eyes, pride and fear and gratitude all mixed together. "4 months ago, I was fixing parking gates. Now I'm watching a vehicle I designed actually work. It doesn't feel real." "It's real. You're allowed to enjoy it." "I'm terrified I'm going to screw it up, that I'll get overconfident or distracted or slip back into the person who missed his wife dying because he was too focused on work." His voice dropped. "What if I can't actually balance this? What if something has to give?" Claire understood the fear behind the question. This was the moment where success started to feel like a threat instead of a triumph, where the weight of expectation could crush you if you let it. "You know what I think?" she said. "I think you're already balancing it. You went to Lily's concert. You have dinner with her every night. You're present in her life in ways that matter. And you're also doing work that's going to change an industry. Those things aren't in conflict unless you let them be." "That's easy to say when you don't have someone depending on you." Ethan stopped, his face flushing. "Sorry, that came out wrong." "No, you're right. I don't have a child. I don't know what that specific pressure feels like." Claire met his eyes. "But I do know what it's like to be so scared of failing that you sabotage your own success. And I'm not going to let you do that. You deserve this, Ethan. The work, the recognition, all of it. And Lily deserves a father who's fulfilled and challenged and growing. You can have both." Ethan held her gaze for a long moment, and Claire felt something pass between them, understanding maybe, or trust, or something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. "Thank you," he said finally, "for believing that when I couldn't." The celebration moved to a nearby bar, the whole team riding the high of successful completion. Claire went for an hour out of obligation, nursing a single drink while engineers compared notes and told stories. Ethan stayed for 2 rounds, laughing at Jennifer's terrible jokes, accepting congratulations from team members who'd been skeptical 3 months ago and were now completely won over. Claire watched him from across the bar, seeing him relaxed and happy in a way that made her chest ache. This was who he was supposed to be. Brilliant and engaged, and part of something bigger than grief. She'd given him that, or at least helped him find his way back to it. And somewhere along the way, she'd fallen completely in love with him. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't friendship or professional respect or even simple attraction. This was the real thing, the kind that changed your entire understanding of what you wanted from life. Claire set down her drink and slipped out of the bar before anyone noticed, walking to her car on unsteady legs. She sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, trying to process what she'd just acknowledged. She was in love with Ethan Cole, with his quiet strength and his fierce devotion to his daughter, and the way he made impossible problems seem simple, with the way he looked at the world like it was full of things worth fixing. And it was the worst possible timing. Ethan was still grieving his wife, still building a new life, still figuring out how to be both a father and a professional again. He didn't need Claire's feelings complicating everything. He needed stability, friendship, support, not romantic pressure from someone who'd already changed his entire trajectory. So she would keep it to herself. She'd be his friend, his advocate, his colleague. She'd help him succeed and make sure he stayed balanced and celebrate his victories. And she'd learn to be satisfied with that, because it was the right thing to do, even if it meant her heart broke a little bit every time he smiled. Claire drove home through the decorated streets of Chicago, Christmas lights blurring through the tears she refused to let fall. She'd wanted to help Ethan rebuild his life, and she'd succeeded. The fact that she wanted to be part of that life in ways she couldn't have was her problem to manage, not his burden to carry. She could do this. She was Claire Morgan. She'd built a career on doing difficult things with grace and determination. Managing her own feelings would be no different. She almost believed it. The next morning, Richard called her into his office before she'd even finished her coffee. He was standing at the window, looking out at the city, and didn't turn around when she entered. "The prototype succeeded beyond our projections," he said. "The board wants to fast-track production. Full vehicle launch in 18 months instead of 3 years." Claire felt excitement surge through her fatigue. "That's incredible." "It is, which is why I'm promoting you to Vice President of Electric Vehicle Development, effective immediately. You'll oversee the entire EV division, manage a team of 30, and report directly to the board on progress. Congratulations." For a moment, Claire couldn't speak. This was everything she'd worked for. Real power, real influence, a seat at the table where decisions got made. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." Richard finally turned to face her. "There's one complication. The board wants Ethan on full-time staff, not as a consultant. They want to offer him the position of Chief Technical Officer for EV development, salary, benefits, the whole package. But it's contingent on you accepting the VP role. They see you two as a unit." Claire's mind raced. This was perfect. This was what she'd hoped for when she first brought Ethan to Harborline, a real position with stability and resources and the ability to make a lasting impact. "What's the complication?" she asked. "The CTO position would require more time on site. Not the 60-hour weeks you and I are used to, but more than his current consulting schedule. The board's concerned about whether he can handle the increased responsibility while maintaining his commitments to his daughter." "He can handle it." "Are you sure? Or are you making assumptions based on what you want to be true?" Richard's expression was gentle but firm. "This is a critical decision, Claire. If Ethan accepts and then can't deliver, it reflects on both of you. And if he accepts and burns out, that's on your conscience. So I need you to be very certain before I extend this offer." Claire thought about Ethan in the lab, solving impossible problems with quiet confidence. She thought about him at his daughter's concert, choosing presence over professional advancement. She thought about the careful balance he'd maintained for 3 months, proving that it was possible to excel at work and still be the parent Lily needed. "I'm certain," she said, "Ethan Cole is ready for this, and I'll make sure he has the support to succeed." Richard studied her face for a long moment. "Then it's settled. I'll make the offers official on Monday. You'll have the weekend to prepare for the transition." Claire left his office feeling like she was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying. She'd just committed to working closely with Ethan for the foreseeable future, seeing him every day, collaborating on strategy, building something unprecedented together, all while pretending she wasn't in love with him. She pulled out her phone and sent him a text. "Can you meet me for coffee this afternoon? Something important to discuss." His response came within minutes. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's great, I promise." "Okay. 3 p.m. at the usual place?" "Perfect." Claire spent the rest of the day preparing how to present the opportunity, how to make it clear this was about his talent and not about her feelings, how to give him an honest assessment of what accepting would mean for his life with Lily. When she met him at the coffee shop that afternoon, Ethan looked concerned despite her reassurance. "What's going on?" Claire took a breath and dove in. "Richard wants to offer you a full-time position, Chief Technical Officer of EV Development. It would mean more time on site than you're working now, but still flexible compared to most executive roles. Real salary, benefits, the chance to shape Harborline's entire electric vehicle strategy." Ethan stared at her. "Are you serious?" "Completely. The board was so impressed with the prototype that they want to fast-track production, and they want you leading the technical side." Claire paused. "But I need you to think carefully about whether this is right for you and Lily. This isn't consulting anymore. This is a career, a real commitment, and I won't pressure you either way." "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should take 24 hours to consider it seriously. Talk to Lily, think about what you want your life to look like, and then make the decision that's right for both of you, not the one you think I want to hear." Ethan was quiet, his coffee cooling between his hands. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think I can do this? Not just the technical work. I know I can do that, but the whole thing. The leadership, the strategy, the politics of executive work, without losing myself again. Claire looked at the man sitting across from her, the one who'd stopped on a highway because someone needed help, who'd walked away from a prestigious career to raise his daughter, who'd spent 3 months proving that dedication and balance weren't mutually exclusive. "I think you're the only person I know who can," she said honestly, "because you've already done the hardest part. You've rebuilt yourself from the ground up with your priorities straight. Most people take positions like this and then try to figure out balance. You'd be walking in with boundaries already established. That's powerful." Ethan nodded slowly. "I need to think about it." "That's exactly what you should do." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city move around them. Finally, Ethan said, "If I do this, if I take the position, things will change between us, won't they? We'd be colleagues in a different way. More formal." "Probably." Claire kept her voice steady. "But we'd still be friends. That doesn't change unless we let it." "I don't want it to change." Ethan met her eyes. "Your friendship is one of the best things that's happened to me in 4 years. I don't want to lose that for a job title." Claire felt her heart crack a little. "You won't, I promise." It was a promise she had no idea how to keep, but she made it anyway. Because watching Ethan walk away from this opportunity would hurt worse than anything else, even if accepting it meant she'd have to see him every day and pretend her feelings didn't exist. Ethan called her Sunday evening, his voice steady but serious. "I talked to Lily. We're in." Claire felt relief and terror in equal measure. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." She said, and I quote, "Daddy, you smile more when you talk about your work. I want you to keep smiling." He paused. "How do you argue with that?" "You don't," Claire said softly. "When do you want to tell Richard?" "Tomorrow morning, before I lose my nerve." "You won't lose your nerve. And Ethan, congratulations, you earned this. We'll see if you still think that in 6 months when I'm panicking about quarterly reviews." Claire laughed despite the knot in her stomach. "I'll remind you that you redesigned an entire thermal management system in 4 hours. Quarterly reviews are nothing." Monday morning brought official offer letters, handshakes with Richard, and a flurry of administrative details. Ethan looked overwhelmed but determined, signing documents that committed him to Harborline for the next 3 years minimum. Claire watched from her new office, bigger, corner view, the kind of space that announced you'd arrived, and tried to focus on her own transition instead of the way her heart jumped every time Ethan appeared in her doorway with a question. The first month in their new roles was chaos. Claire was managing a team of 30 people spread across 3 departments, learning to navigate board politics, making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. Ethan was building his own technical team, establishing protocols, translating his individual brilliance into scalable processes. They saw each other constantly. Morning strategy meetings, afternoon check-ins, evening debriefs when projects ran late. It was professional, productive, exactly what it needed to be. It was also slowly killing Claire, because every conversation revealed new layers of who Ethan was. The way he defended his team's need for work-life balance in budget meetings, even when it meant fighting with executives who thought dedication meant sacrifice. The way he'd bring in donuts on Fridays because one of his engineers mentioned missing her grandmother's baking. The way he talked about Lily with such obvious pride and love that Claire's chest ached. She was watching him become everything she'd hoped. A leader who proved you could be exceptional without being ruthless. And she was falling deeper in love with him every single day. Jennifer noticed first. She cornered Claire in the break room on a Tuesday in late January, closing the door with exaggerated care. "Okay, we need to talk about the Ethan situation." Claire felt her defenses slam into place. "There is no Ethan situation. We're colleagues. You're in love with him. It's incredibly obvious to anyone with functioning eyes." I'm not, we're just friends." Jennifer gave her a look that could have melted steel. "Claire, I've worked with you for 3 years. I've seen you negotiate with venture capitalists, stare down board members, and fire underperforming executives without blinking. I have never seen you look at anyone the way you look at Ethan Cole." Claire sank into a chair, the denial crumbling. "It doesn't matter." "How does it not matter?" "Because he's still grieving his wife. Because our professional relationship is too important to complicate. Because I brought him back into this world and he trusts me, and I won't betray that trust by making things awkward with feelings he doesn't share. Claire rubbed her face. I can manage this. I just need to be professional. You've been professional for 2 months and you look miserable. I'm not miserable. I'm busy. You're both. Jennifer sat across from her. Look, I'm not saying you should confess your undying love in the middle of a board meeting, but keeping everything bottled up isn't sustainable. Eventually something's going to break. Then I'll deal with it when it breaks. Right now, I have a job to do. Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but Claire's expression must have warned her off. Fine. But for the record, I think you're underestimating how he feels about you. He doesn't feel anything except friendship and gratitude. If you say so. After Jennifer left, Claire sat alone in the break room, staring at her cold coffee and wondering how much longer she could maintain this facade. Every day was harder than the last. Every casual touch, Ethan's hand on her shoulder when he thanked her for covering a meeting, his arm brushing hers as they reviewed documents, felt like it was burning through her carefully constructed defenses. She needed distance, space to remember who she was outside of this consuming, impossible feeling. That evening, she stayed late working on budget projections, deliberately avoiding the development lab where she knew Ethan would be finishing up his day. When she finally left at 8, the building was mostly empty, just security guards and a few workaholics like herself. She was halfway to her car when she heard footsteps behind her. Claire, wait! She turned to find Ethan jogging across the parking garage, his jacket unbuttoned, his expression concerned. You okay? You've been avoiding me all day. I haven't been avoiding you. I've been busy. Right. Too busy to respond to texts, too busy for our morning coffee, too busy to make eye contact in the strategy meeting. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. Did I do something wrong? Claire felt something crack inside her chest. She couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't pretend everything was fine when it felt like she was drowning every time he looked at her. No, you didn't do anything wrong. I'm trying to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. Ethan frowned. Since when have we needed to worry about that? Since we became VP and CTO. Since our decisions affect 30 people's livelihoods. Since... Claire stopped, biting back the real answer. Since what? Nothing. Forget it. Claire. Ethan stepped closer, his voice gentle. We're friends. Whatever's bothering you, you can tell me. And that was the problem. They were friends. Good friends. Maybe best friends, if Claire was honest. Ethan trusted her completely, shared things with her he didn't share with anyone else. She was the person he called when Lily had a bad dream about her mother, when he doubted himself, when he needed someone to remind him he was doing okay. She couldn't ruin that by admitting she wanted more. I'm fine, Claire said, forcing a smile. Just stressed about the production timeline. I'll see you tomorrow. She got in her car before he could respond, pulling out of the garage with her hands shaking on the wheel. In her rearview mirror, she could see Ethan standing in the parking spot, watching her leave with an expression she couldn't read. The next 3 weeks were torture. Claire threw herself into work, taking on extra projects, staying late, doing anything to avoid the quiet moments where her feelings became impossible to ignore. Ethan seemed to sense something was wrong, but he didn't push, just maintained his usual friendly professionalism while Claire built walls between them, one interaction at a time. Jennifer watched the whole thing with increasing frustration. You know this is making everything worse, right? I'm handling it. You're not handling it. You're suffering in silence while Ethan walks around looking confused and hurt. It's painful to watch. Then stop watching. But Jennifer was right. Claire could see the impact of her distance. Ethan had started hesitating before coming to her office, his easy confidence replaced by uncertainty. Their morning coffees had stopped entirely. The friendship that had sustained both of them was withering, and it was Claire's fault. The breaking point came in mid-February during a board presentation about production timelines. Claire and Ethan were supposed to present together, her on market strategy, him on technical capabilities. They'd rehearsed it twice, their rhythm smooth and natural despite Claire's emotional distance. But during the actual presentation, something went wrong. A board member challenged one of Ethan's technical assertions, and instead of defending it himself, Ethan looked to Claire for backup. She saw the moment of vulnerability in his face, the flash of doubt that said he wasn't sure he belonged in this room full of powerful people. And she froze. For 5 terrible seconds, Claire just stared at him, her mind blank, her prepared support evaporating. By the time she recovered and jumped in with the necessary data, the damage was done. The board member had sensed weakness, and Ethan had seen Claire's hesitation. The rest of the presentation went fine, but Claire felt sick. She'd failed him. In the moment when he'd needed her to have his back, she'd been too caught up in her own feelings to function properly. After the meeting, Ethan didn't say anything, just walked back to his office with his shoulders tight, his expression carefully neutral. Claire followed him, closing his door behind her. "Ethan, I'm sorry. That hesitation, it's fine, we still got through it." "It's not fine, I should have been faster to support you." He turned to face her, and the careful neutrality was gone, replaced by something raw and frustrated. "What's going on with you, Claire? And don't tell me nothing, because we both know that's not true. Ever since we took these positions, you've been pulling away. If this partnership isn't working for you, if you regret bringing me here, I don't regret it. That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" "Because I can't keep guessing. I can't keep wondering if I did something wrong or if you're just done with our friendship now that we're colleagues instead of—" He stopped, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "Help me understand." Claire felt everything inside her crystallize into a single sharp point of clarity. She could keep lying, keep pretending, keep slowly destroying the best friendship she'd ever had. Or she could tell the truth and deal with whatever came after. The choice was easier than she expected. "I'm in love with you," she said quietly. "I've been in love with you since December, maybe longer, and I know the timing is terrible and inappropriate, and you don't feel the same way, but that's what's wrong. That's why I've been distant, because seeing you every day and pretending I only care about you as a colleague or a friend is slowly breaking me apart." Ethan stared at her, his expression completely unreadable. The silence stretched so long Claire wanted to run, to take it back, to pretend she'd never said anything. Then he said, "You think I don't feel the same way?" Claire's breath caught. "What? You think I stop by your office 5 times a day for work reasons? You think I text you photos of things that made me think of you because we're colleagues? You think I—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Claire, I've been terrified of saying anything because you're the person who gave me my life back. You're the reason I'm here, doing work I love, being a better father to Lily. I didn't want to ruin that by admitting that somewhere along the way, friendship stopped being enough." Claire felt dizzy. You have feelings for me? I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you for months. I just didn't think I had the right to say anything when you were being so carefully professional. I was being professional because I didn't think you were ready for anything beyond friendship. You lost Sarah 4 years ago. And I will always love her, always miss her. But that doesn't mean I can't love someone else." Ethan stepped closer, his voice soft. "Sarah's gone. And I spent 3 years just surviving, not living, until you stopped on that highway and refused to let me stay small. You saw something in me worth saving, and then you gave me a chance to become that person again. How could I not fall in love with you?" Claire's eyes were burning. "I didn't save you. You did that yourself. We saved each other." Ethan reached out, his hand cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "You think I don't see how lonely you were? How you'd built this perfect, successful life that didn't leave room for anyone to actually know you? You let me in. You trusted me with the parts of yourself you don't show the board or your team. That's not nothing, Claire." "I was so scared," Claire whispered. "Scared that if I told you, I'd lose you completely. That you'd think I brought you here for ulterior motives, or that I was taking advantage. You weren't. You aren't." Ethan's thumb brushed across her cheek. "You gave me an opportunity based on my talent, and then you gave me space to become the person I wanted to be. The fact that I fell in love with you along the way, that's separate. That's real, and it has nothing to do with gratitude or obligation." Claire let herself lean into his touch, her eyes closing. "What do we do now?" "I don't know. Figure it out together?" Ethan's voice held a smile. "We're pretty good at solving impossible problems. Claire opened her eyes and found him watching her with an expression so full of affection and hope that her breath caught. Lily would be thrilled. She's been asking when you're coming over for dinner again. She thinks you're cool. The board can deal with it. We're not doing anything wrong. We're two adults with feelings who happen to work together. As long as we're professional at work, our personal life is our business. Richard? Ethan kissed her, soft and careful and perfect, like he'd been thinking about it for months and wanted to get it exactly right. Claire melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, all the feelings she'd been suppressing flooding through her at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. Richard can deal with it too. Claire laughed, giddy and relieved and happier than she could remember being. We're really doing this? If you want to, no pressure, no expectations, just seeing where this goes, together. Together, Claire agreed. I like the sound of that. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the tension of months finally released. Eventually, Claire pulled back enough to look at him properly. We should probably establish some ground rules for work. Absolutely. Very professional ground rules. Like not making out in your office during business hours. That's a good rule. Ethan kissed her again, gentle and sweet. We'll start following it tomorrow. Claire smiled against his lips. Tomorrow works. The next 6 months were a delicate balance of professional excellence and personal discovery. At work, Claire and Ethan maintained careful boundaries, collaborative but not overly familiar, supportive without being obvious. The team adapted quickly to their new dynamic, and if anyone suspected there was something more between them, they were professional enough not to comment. Outside of work, they built something neither of them had expected. Ethan introduced Claire to Lily slowly, carefully, making sure his daughter was comfortable at every step. Lily took to Claire with an enthusiasm that was both touching and slightly overwhelming, asking constant questions and showing her drawings and insisting Claire come to every school event. She's never been this excited about any of my friends, Ethan said one evening after tucking Lily into bed. They were sitting on his couch, Claire's head on his shoulder, the small apartment feeling more like home than her expensive condo ever had. I'm not just your friend anymore, Claire pointed out. True. But even when you were, she saw something special. Kids have good instincts about people. Claire thought about the memory book they'd made together, the three of them sitting at Ethan's kitchen table while Lily shared stories about her mother that made them all laugh and cry. Sarah was part of their lives now, present in photos and anecdotes, and the way Ethan would sometimes get a distant look before smiling and sharing another memory. It didn't feel like competition. It felt like honoring the woman who'd made Ethan the father and man he was today. The production timeline accelerated through spring. The first vehicles rolled off the line in May, their thermal management systems performing flawlessly. By June, Harborline had orders that exceeded their wildest projections. The automotive press called it a game changer. Richard called it vindication. Claire called it proof that betting on people instead of credentials was good business. In August, Claire and Ethan presented at an industry conference in Detroit. Their joint presentation on sustainable innovation and work-life integration packed the room, with audience members taking notes on everything from technical specifications to Ethan's flexible schedule structure. Afterward, a young engineer approached them with tears in her eyes. I've been thinking about leaving the industry because I couldn't figure out how to be both a good engineer and a good mother. Hearing that your CTO manages both, it gives me hope. Ethan had looked at Claire then, and she'd seen everything they'd built together reflected in his expression. Not just vehicles or corporate success, but proof that there were different ways to define achievement. That evening, walking along the Detroit riverfront after the conference, Ethan stopped and turned to face her. Move in with us. Claire's heart jumped. What? You're at the apartment 4 nights a week anyway. Lily asks why you have to leave every time. I want to wake up next to you every morning, not just the nights you decide to stay over. He took her hands. I know it's fast. I know there are 100 practical considerations, but I also know that I love you, and Lily loves you. And coming home to you feels right in a way nothing has since Sarah died. So move in with us. Please. Claire thought about her pristine condo with its perfect view and its profound emptiness. She thought about Lily's laughter and Ethan's terrible pancakes and the chaotic warmth of their small apartment. She thought about the family they were building from grief and gratitude and choice. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. Ethan kissed her right there on the riverfront, laughing against her lips while sunset painted the sky in shades of gold. By September, Claire had sold her condo and moved her minimal belongings into the apartment. They started looking for a house, something bigger, with a yard for the dog Lily desperately wanted, close to good schools and Harbor Line headquarters. Something that could be theirs together, rather than a space defined by loss or loneliness. The prototype that had started everything was unveiled at an automotive expo in October, exactly 1 year after Claire's car had broken down on I-90. Standing on stage next to Ethan, watching industry leaders examine the vehicle they'd built together, Claire felt the symmetry of it all. A broken car had brought them together. A fixed one had changed their lives. During the Q&A session, someone asked Ethan what had inspired him to return to automotive engineering after years away. He'd looked at Claire before answering. Someone reminded me that the things we're good at matter, and that using our gifts doesn't mean sacrificing the people we love. I'd forgotten that. I'm grateful I got a second chance to remember. The expo celebrated their technical achievement, but Claire knew the real success was everything they'd built around it. Ethan had a career he loved and a daughter who was thriving. Claire had a family she'd never expected and work that felt meaningful. Together, they'd proven that professional excellence and personal fulfillment weren't mutually exclusive. They just required the courage to believe both were possible. In November, exactly 1 year after their first dinner at Lucia's, they went back to the restaurant. Maria greeted them like family, immediately bringing wine and asking about Lily and insisting they try the new lasagna recipe. "You two look happy," she said, beaming at them. "Different than last year. Lighter." "We are happy," Ethan said, his hand finding Claire's under the table. After dinner, they drove to the same stretch of I-90 where Claire's BMW had died. It was cold again, autumn sliding into winter, the kind of morning that felt like a year ago and a lifetime ago, all at once. "Hard to believe it's only been a year," Claire said, looking at the shoulder where she'd pulled over in desperation. "Best car trouble I ever had," Ethan said. "Best sandwich I ever gave away." They stood there for a moment, remembering. Then Ethan pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. Claire's breath caught. "Ethan." "I talked to Lily first," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "She helped me pick it out, said it needed to be pretty but not too sparkly because you're practical like that." Claire laughed through sudden tears. "I know we've only been together officially for 9 months. I know there are people who'll say it's too fast, but I also know that I want to spend every morning making terrible pancakes with you, every evening listening to Lily's stories with you, every moment of this messy, beautiful life with you. So, Claire Morgan, will you marry me?" Claire looked at the man who'd stopped on a highway to help a stranger, who'd rebuilt his life with grace and courage, who'd let her into his heart when he could have stayed closed off forever. She thought about the family they were building, the home they were creating, the love that had grown from something as simple as kindness on a cold morning. "Yes," she said. 1,000 times yes. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, and they kissed on the side of the highway where everything had started, cars rushing past without stopping because they didn't need rescue anymore. They'd already saved each other. 3 months later, they bought a house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and a backyard perfect for the golden retriever puppy Lily named Butterscotch. Claire's mother flew in to help them move, crying happy tears and telling everyone who'd listen about her daughter, who'd found love when she'd stopped looking. Harbor Line's electric vehicle line won industry awards through the winter. Ethan's thermal management system became the gold standard. Claire's division grew to 50 employees, all of them working under policies that valued both productivity and humanity. But the moment that mattered most to Claire came on a Saturday morning in early spring. She woke up in their new house to the smell of burning pancakes and Lily's laughter. Ethan was in the kitchen, flour on his shirt, looking frazzled and happy. Butterscotch was barking at nothing in the backyard. Chaos everywhere. It was perfect. "How do you always burn them?" Claire asked, sliding her arms around Ethan's waist. "It's a gift," he said, kissing her forehead. "Lily says they taste better crispy anyway." "Lily is very kind. Their wedding was planned for June, small, intimate, just family and close friends. Lily was going to be the flower girl, though she'd negotiated hard for the title of best person instead. Jennifer was Claire's maid of honor and had already started planning inappropriate toasts. But standing in their kitchen that morning, Claire realized they were already married in all the ways that mattered. They'd built this life together from broken pieces, from chance encounters and conscious choices, from the courage to believe that second chances were real. The wedding would be beautiful, but this, pancakes and laughter and a man she loved making breakfast for a daughter who'd become hers too. This was everything. A year and a half after a BMW died on I-90, Claire Morgan and Ethan Cole stood in their backyard during an evening barbecue, watching Lily play with butterscotch while their friends and colleagues mingled. Richard was there, telling embarrassing stories from Claire's early days at Harborline. Jennifer was teaching Lily how to throw a frisbee. Maria from the restaurant had brought enough lasagna to feed an army. "We should make a toast," Ethan said, pulling Claire close. "To what?" "To lucky breaks, to sandwiches, to the best car trouble in history." Well, Claire laughed and raised her glass of wine. The gathered friends quieted, turning to listen. "To second chances," Claire said, "to people who stop when they see someone who needs help, to courage and kindness, and building the life you want instead of the one you think you're supposed to have." "To family," Ethan added, his arm around her waist, "the ones we're born into and the ones we choose." "To love," Lily called out, making everyone laugh. They clinked glasses as the sun set over their new life, their new home, their chosen family. And somewhere in Chicago, on a stretch of I-90 that looked like any other stretch of highway, the place where their story started remained unremarkable to everyone except them. Because sometimes the most important moments look ordinary. Sometimes salvation comes from grease-stained hands and a willing heart. Sometimes a sandwich means more than money. And sometimes fixing someone's car means fixing so much more. Claire looked at Ethan, at the man who'd stopped when he didn't have to, who'd taken a chance when it terrified him, who'd let her love him when he could have stayed safe in his grief, and felt gratitude so profound it took her breath away. They'd saved each other on that cold morning, and they'd been saving each other every day since. That was the real story. Not the professional success, or the industry recognition, or the awards that would come. The real story was two people who'd chosen each other, who'd built something beautiful from broken pieces, who'd proven that the best things in life often start with the smallest acts of kindness, like stopping for a stranger, like sharing a sandwich, like believing that broken things, cars, hearts, lives, could all be fixed with the right combination of skill, patience, and love.